Greetings everyone, this is David. This video is going to be looking at more than just the case of automatic excommunication using the historical example of Nestorius, but also a deep look into Roman Catholic ecclesiology in relation to the idea of automatic excommunication and contrasting it with Orthodox ecclesiology. So for those who don't know, I kind of want to define some terms here for those who might be new to these discussions. Automatic excommunication, also known as ipso facto excommunication, to give an example, will be, let's say, a bishop says a very clear heretical statement that is notorious by fact, cannot be denied, it's said in public forum, and it's very openly, blatantly heretical. Maybe that bishop prays to a foreign deity, right, or something like that. That will be an example of manifest heresy, and that person will be automatically excommunicated the moment that person started to preach heresy bareheaded and publicly. So that's what automatic excommunication is. So now let's take a look at the historical case of Nestorius and some letters that was exchanged about this issue. Nestorius was the Archbishop of Constantinople between 428 and 431. His main heresy is his denial of the title Theotokos, and his rejection of this title led him to have a theology of two-subject Christology. This person, Nestorius, was attacked by St. Cyril of Alexandria, who was his main opponent, and he cooperated with Pope St. Celestine, who was the Pope of Rome at the time, in order to condemn Nestorius, and this condemnation happened in what is known today as the Third Ecumenical Council, which is the Council of Ephesus in 431. That's when he was formally deposed. So now let's take a look at some of the letters by Pope St. Celestine. He, in his argument about Nestorius' status, he basically says anyone that was excommunicated or stripped of episcopal or clerical dignity by Nestorius, we do not recognize his authority. He says, it is manifest that such a person has continued firmly and still continues firmly in our communion, and we judge him not to have been removed. So St. Celestine is basically saying that he does not recognize the authority of Nestorius to be able to depose or excommunicate bishops. He considers them to be still bishops of the church. He also says that the authority of our apostolic see has openly ordained that no bishop, cleric, or Christian of any profession who were deposed from their position or from communion by Nestorius and those of his ilk from the time they began to preach heresy is to be seen as either deposed or excommunicated. So he doesn't recognize Nestorius' authority here. And let's look at St. Cyril of Alexandria. This is letter 11. This is his letter to Pope St. Celestine. And he's kind of asking St. Celestine whether he should still remain in communion with Nestorius or whether he should separate himself from him, because one of the things he says is basically Nestorius says irregular things. Some people use this as evidence that there's no one in communion that believes such a thing, but even St. Cyril of Alexandria himself doesn't agree with that interpretation, because after the Council of Ephesus was finished, he started to attack historical bishops of the Antiochian bishopric specifically, people like Theodore of Mopsuestia, who was condemned by the Fifth Ecumenical Council 100 years later, and Diodor of Tarsus. So these are the people he went after and the people who defended their views that still live today. So even he himself believes that, yes, there's some people that was even in his communion at the time that believe certain things. When I say his communion, I mean the churches that he is in communion with. So that kind of sets the stage. And then let's put a pause here, and we will get back to this later when we continue talking about the history of this. Now I want to talk briefly about the Roman Catholic view of ecclesiology, particularly from Robert Bellarmine. Now, Robert Bellarmine is not just some random person. He's not just some random dude who's pontificating about things and that no one listened to. He is a doctor of the church. He's a very important Counter-Reformation figure. He's one of the very few doctors of the church in the Roman Catholic Church, or if I were to borrow a Sedevacantist terminology, a so-called Roman Catholic Church. He is one of the most important figures and has many ecclesiological writings. Now, another thing that I want to note is that what inspired me to make this video is the debate between Peter Demond and Jeff Cassman on Pints with Aquinas' channel, because this debate really showed the incoherency of the Roman Catholic position, and Peter Demond kind of reference a lot of Robert Bellarmine's arguments that I want to reference here also. He says a manifestly heretical pope automatically ceases to be pope and the head, just as he automatically ceases to be a Christian and a member of the body of the church, and that for this reason he may be judged and punished by the church. He then says in the same work that heretics, however, even before an excommunication, are outside the church and deprived of all jurisdiction, for they are condemned by their own judgment. And when it comes to sourcing his beliefs from the ancient times, he cites Pope Nicholas. Yes, that Pope Nicholas who was against Saint Photius. And we know history has vindicated Saint Photius. And Pope Saint Celestine, which is what this video is about. So you can really see that, in fact, there's really no ancient precedence for Robert Bellarmine's beliefs. However, let's take a deeper look at Robert Bellarmine's ecclesiology. Sorry, well, technically ecclesiology is Christological, but still, his ecclesiology. In Joseph Clifford Fenton's The Status of Robert Bellarmine's Teaching about the Membership of Occult Heretics in the Catholic Church, he notes that Robert Bellarmine's idea of the unity of the church is based on completely external signs. That is not to say that inward signs are unimportant, but they are excluded because it's the external signs that manifest the unity of the church. In fact, in the debate, Peter Demond argued this very point against Cassman. He says that many Roman Catholic, according to the Roman Catholic tradition, according to the various different saints of the Roman Catholic tradition, the unity of the church is based on external signs. And to further make this point, Eric MACKENZIE himself makes these statements in the Delict of Heresy. He says, a delinquent guilty of the simple delict of heresy incurs ecclesiastical excommunication in its simplest forms. And he then goes to argue that these, one can be a heretic by the words and deeds that they do, by their external signs. So we do not have to ask questions, but we can get the external signs by their words and their actions. So we can have an idea of their inward thoughts. Because some Roman Catholics try to play word games on this and argue that, we cannot condemn this pope or that pope as heretic because we haven't really asked them. We haven't really put them into question or such things. But Eric MACKENZIE points out that you don't need to do that. In fact, he says, if the delict of heresy had been notorious, either in fact or by judicial process, there is less opportunity of applying this canon. Now, whatever this canon is not important. What is important is that he talks about notoriety of fact. This is in fact referenced in Roman Catholic Canon Law 2197, which speaks about notoriety of fact by examples such as this, where there is no defense that you can make, where heretical statements are openly bareheaded made, or actions are openly made by these examples here. They will incur automatic excommunication, even according to MACKENZIE, technically, even according to Code of Canon Law in the Roman Catholic Church, if we are to accept the ecclesiology of Robert Bellarmine, which is the ecclesiological view that won over. So as you can see in these images, according to Robert Bellarmine's ecclesiological views, this is proof that this church is not a united church. There's no unity of faith. And these popes cannot be true popes. And in fact, these popes are manifest heretics, again, according to Robert Bellarmine. The image on the bottom right, particularly, some people might not know what that image means. That image is the joint declaration with the Lutherans on justification. This joint declaration has a lot of interesting statements, such as how that this joint declaration shows that the remaining differences are no longer the occasion for doctrinal condemnations. So according to this declaration, there is no occasion to condemn the Lutheran Church. And this joint declaration then speaks on justification. The teaching of the Lutheran churches presented in this declaration does not fall under the condemnations from the Council of Trent, which is not true, which is absolutely not true. And another thing it says, in light of this consensus, the corresponding doctrinal condemnations of the 16th century, which is the Council of Trent, do not apply to today's partner. Another thing from, again, John Paul II is in his, this is titled Prayer of the Holy Father. This is in his visit to Wadi al-Harar. He says, may Saint John, forgive me for even uttering these words, but he says, may Saint John the Baptist protect Islam and all the people of Jordan and all who participated in the celebration, a memorable celebration. I'm very grateful to all of you. Thank you very much. So he literally asked Saint John the Baptist to protect Islam, right? These are very clear examples of manifest heresy. And according to Robert Bellarmine, even if you're a pope, if you're a manifest heretic, you're automatically excommunicated from the church. Now, this is the part where I come in and kind of argue, well, maybe the apostasy didn't occur in, 958 or in Vatican II. Maybe it happened even prior to it. And this kind of gets into questions. But before I get to those questions, I want to kind of briefly talk about historical cases that can also be used. This is from the First Second Council, a council presided by Saint Photius, that talks about bareheaded heretics. And it basically speaks about people who separate themselves from communion from public heretics like Nestorius, and says that you can do such a thing. But once we look at Saint Nikodemus of the Holy Mountain and his understanding of the canons in his rudder, or in the Greek pedalion, you will see that there's a very different interpretation and understanding of these canons in the Orthodox view compared to the Roman Catholic view. For Saint Nicodemus, the canons command the council of living bishops to depose the priests, or to excommunicate them, or to anathematize laymen who violate the canons. Yet if the council does not actually effect the deposition of the priests, or the excommunication or the anathematization of laymen, these priests and laymen are neither actually deposed, nor excommunicated, nor anathematized. And he considers this a very foolish view. There's a very big mistake that silly men make, according to Saint Nicodemus. He gives the example of accepting heretical baptisms. He says, according to the canons, those who accept heretical baptisms should be deposed, but that deposition is not actualized until there is a council or decision by a bishop made. So the canons are commands and guides for us, but it's the bishop that applies the canons, according to St. Nicodemus. So for St. Nicodemus, there is no such thing as automatic excommunication. Even if you look at the Canon 15, yes, it calls these bishops pseudo-bishops and pseudo-teachers, but in the Orthodox view, we differentiate between the bishop himself and the office that the bishop holds. There's actual evidence of this, which is in the Fifth Ecumenical Council. Patrick Gray, in the Defense of Chalcedon in the East, page 72, says, the Fifth Council made it clear that when it condemned Vigilius, it considered itself to be breaking communion with Vigilius personally, not with the See of Rome. This is from the session, the seventh session, where Vigilius, when he is being condemned, notice what Vigilius is referred to. He's not referred to as Pope Vigilius. He's just referred to as Vigilius. And this is going to be very important in the point that I'm about to make after I make this other point, which is that Roman Catholic ecclesiology is fundamentally circular. If there is even a possibility that a pope or a bishop can be manifest heretics and automatically deposed, then this puts into question whether you are in the church itself. So let me formulate the argument this way. We know the true teachings of the church because of the papacy, right? That's what Roman Catholics say. They say this all the time. The true teachings of the church are known because of the institution of the papacy. But then, if you put the papacy itself into question, whether the papacy can be questioned, what is the response then? Oh, we know the true pope because of the teachings of the church. So it's a circle. It's a massive circle. It's a circular argument. It's a very invalid argument. Ultimately, the papacy, when even the pope can be questioned whether the pope is a true pope or a false pope. And again, if you take Robert Bellarmine's ecclesiology, then you can very much be able to question these views. Then, by this logic, you cannot even be certain of the teachings of the church itself, because the authority resides in the pope, but that can be questioned. And the way you solve that question is by looking at the teachings of the church, but that is what is in question in the first place. So ultimately, debates between the Orthodox and Roman Catholics have to be on theological grounds, even if we ignore this major circular, major illogicality. Aside from that, and this is the main point that I'm trying to arrive in this video, let's unpause from the pause at the start of this video. Let's give an unpause and continue with what happened. Now, after St. Cyril of Alexandria's correspondence with Pope St. Celestine, months after this, where Pope St. Celestine basically said, we do not recognize Nestorius, You can anathematize him, you can oppose him, you can, handle him because, you're the opponent, etc., etc. Saint Cyril of Alexandria sends a third letter to Nestorius. And this is the letter where St. Cyril of Alexandria attacks Nestorius and gives him the 12 anathemas and says, you must accept these 12 anathemas. If you reject them, then, you're a heretic. You're guaranteed a heretic. He starts this letter where he sends the 12 anathemas with, to the most pious and devout fellow minister, Nestorius. Is that not good enough for you? Let's look at the Council of Ephesus itself. Again, even if you're a Roman Catholic, even if you are a papal supremacist, you have to accept that the Council of Ephesus is an ecumenical council. That means you have to accept what happened in the Council of Ephesus. Well, guess what happened in the Council of Ephesus? In session 1, for example, it speaks of Nestorius as the most reverend Nestorius. This is before his formal deposition. And St. Cyril of Alexandria says that what I wrote to the most religious Nestorius, and another instance, most holy Archbishop Kirill to Nestorius the bishop. So now Nestorius is called a bishop. So at the start of this video, what we take a look at? We took a look at some of St. Celestine's letters where he said that he does not recognize the authority of Nestorius. Here you have the Council of Ephesus saying that actually before we formally depose him, we have to call him bishop. Letter of the most reverend Nestorius. Again, this is important because of this example that I showed, because in contrast to this, in the Fifth Ecumenical Council, Vigilius, when he's being condemned, he's not even referred to as Pope Vigilius. He's referred to just Vigilius. Okay, just Vigilius. So this gives you a very good example that, in fact, even in church history, Robert Bellarmine, the Roman Catholic Church, is wrong on the idea of automatic excommunication. People do not lose all jurisdictional powers when they preach manifest heresy. They must be deposed by a council in order to actually be deposed. So formal deposition is necessary. In fact, Ubi Petrus has an excellent video on this point where he shows the example of Saint Celestine, right? Even though Saint Celestine did not recognize the excommunications of Nestorius, again, the Council of Ephesus still had to rehabilitate the bishops that were deposed by Nestorius himself. So there's a very different ecclesiology in the Third Ecumenical Council compared to the ecclesiology of the Roman Catholic Church. And this shows that the Orthodox Church is the true church and the true bride of Christ. Thank you for watching. I would like to give a brief thank you to the Patreon financiers for financially supporting me. Giga Chad himself has joined us. Quinn, Michael, Sean, Tim, Brian with a Y, Brian with an I, Marco, Daiso, Lights, Allison, Eddie, Far, Justin, Node, Maximus, Mitch, Steven, Vlad, Kerry, Ignatius, Mike, Jack, Nectaris, Flood, Basement, Dave, Seraphim, Norbert. Thank you all for supporting me, and thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, make sure to like this, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this to your friends. Definitely do share this to your friends, and I will see all of you in the next video that I will come up with. Thank you for watching, and may God be with you all. Goodbye.